podcast. It is Sunday night as we record this, January 24th. My name is Rob Dauster. The gentleman that you see right there with me is the one and only Da'Sean Butler, former West Virginia All-American. And the Chiefs and the Buccaneers are heading to the Super Bowl. Da'Sean, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I can't complain, man. All is well. Kids are asleep. I have the most important part of my night is talking basketball with you, so I'm very happy.
Yeah.
Most important, the most fun
honored.
I have tonight. No, that's the most fun I'll have tonight.
I'm honored, man. I'm honored.
Perfect.
I'm honored. Did you? How much of the football games did you watch? You get to watch any of it?
No, we are knee deep in the Avengers timeline right now. I think we've made it to Doctor Strange. I was watching the game from my phone, a little bit of it, but not much.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I had the same situation going. We had the sound going like while we were eating dinner, and then like I was on. So I made dinner and then I did the dishes tonight. Where somehow I got stuck doing both making dinner and cleaning up dinner. So like I had it on my phone when it was going, like when I was trying to do dishes and stuff. So I kind of like I tracked it, but I mean I have so much trouble getting into any kind of football if I don't have like. If I'm not betting on it or I don't have like fantasy football implications or anything. And,
yeah. At least you get to listen to the stuff at the table. That's a big no-no in our house. I get scolded. So, and the children too. So we know our roles here in the house and we don't turn devices on at the table.
Well, normally we don't do that, but I made an exception. I said since I had to make dinner, I was going to leave it on. So
there you go. Put your foot down, Rob.
We had it. It's not. No, I never do.
Joking.
Like,
I'm just joking.
What's funny? Like that never ever works in my house. Like it would never ever work in my house. Yeah. I don't make any kind of decisions. But I basically just pleaded like, can we just leave this on so I could track it? But like I didn't even care at that point, man. Like I'm so divested from the NFL at this point. I don't know. I find it very difficult to care all that much about the NFL this year. But this is not an NFL podcast, which is great because neither of us know anything about football, apparently.
I'm good.
This is a college basketball podcast. It is the Monday Overreactions podcast, and I got plenty of things to fire at you. We have plenty of stuff to talk about. We got to get to Kansas. We're definitely going to talk about Iowa. I do want to talk about some coaches that are on the quote-unquote hot seat. And of course, there were some big wins that we have to get to. But the first thing that I want to talk about is Jerry Stackhouse, after Vanderbilt lost to Arkansas, just completely threw his team under the bus. He said we have guys that basically said we have guys that don't really want to play. And he specifically went out and threw a freshman named Miles Stute under the bus. And this is what he said. He says, you hate to point out one thing, one guy, but it's just today it was literally Miles Stute. I couldn't even keep him in the game. And freshmen are going to have ups and downs, but they're supposed to be able to play well at home. I expect them to not to perform as well on the road. That's typically what role players and young guys struggle with. But we get, again, those three middle drives that led, and then he went on some other note, but he specifically called out and specifically named a freshman for not playing up to his potential. And that wasn't the only, like he kind of went off. So I'm just curious, like you played for a guy that is probably as intense as anybody in college basketball. You played at the NBA level. You played professionally overseas for a long time. Eventually you're going to get into coaching, I'm assuming. So what do you make of that? Is that the way that you would handle that situation? Are you okay with that? If that was your son or someone that played for like your AAU program, how would you feel about Jerry Stackhouse doing that? Because I have all kinds of takes and I don't think that it's the right thing to do, but I'm going to give you the floor on this one.
I talked to a ton of my, I heard some of the stuff he said. I didn't hear the part about him talking about Miles Stute, which I feel is like, well, first of all, everything he said, I didn't really too much agree with, but that just to throw the kid personally, just to speak his name and throw him under the bus, I feel like that's a no-no. You can't do that as a coach. Why I want to get into coaching, and I'm not sure if everybody else wants to get like what their reasons are for, but I mean, I love basketball, and I don't know the ins and outs of the business. I see and I saw how tough it is for our head coach and our assistant coaches when I was at WVU as a grad assistant. How tough it is for the coaches at the professional levels overseas and in the NBA. Like it's guys like it's like almost like a presidential type deal where you see them when they get the job and they're young, and then all the stress because of the job and everything that the job entails, and these dudes like look older and everything like that.
Hey, look, that is true. After a long season,
like
a guy gets a head coaching job, and all of a sudden, 2 years later, he's got white hair. Like Tony Bennett was.
Great.
Tony Bennett was like this handsome young man, and then he gets a head coaching job in Virginia. And he has to go up against Duke and North Carolina and Syracuse and Virginia, or I'm sorry, Syracuse and Louisville 2 times every year. And all of a sudden, he's the silver fox.
Exactly, and it takes a
toll.
It's a tough job, and the job only gets tougher if you want to do the job because of just wins and losses. Wins and losses can't be why you want to coach. And I kind of feel like he was frustrated because of he named some of the reasons why he was frustrated. So I'm not going to assume that just the winning is the most important. He named things about him going over things with these guys constantly, day in and day out, and them making the same mistakes in the games and just think there's no carryover. I remember him saying, but you can't. He's been in the business of basketball, like professionally. he went to college. He knows what it's like to be in these players' shoes. He wouldn't have liked that if he played. Why would you do it to the player? Why subject these younger dudes who, you're supposed to be able to, and this is one of the quotes from my friends when I talked to him about it. He's like, you're supposed to be able to like hold this mirror up to these players and show them the best parts of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that when you do stuff like that, when you go out to the media and lash out at your team, how is that helping them see the best parts of themselves? When you point out a particular player who's a freshman, by the way, how do you start off saying, I know you're a freshman and yada, 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 but like he's a freshman and you're expecting him to, and also in the same sense, in another sentence, he like killed his 4-year and 5-year guys. Like you can't do stuff like that. You won't keep a locker room. You won't garner any respect. I mean, I don't know how they feel about him. I can't say you can't, like they probably still respect him. They probably still have love for him. But I know it can definitely cause a strain on the team if I was on the team and the coach decided to do that instead of just talk to me personally. And maybe he did talk to this guy.
You got to keep it in house.
But you got to keep it in house. You can't just spill that out. Like it's one thing if you say that to your staff.
Mm-hmm.
And even then it's just like, geez, that's it's tough. But I mean, if you said it to your staff,
even then,
it's their staff. It's in house.
Yes.
You just went out and went on a rant. And not to mention, he's like going back and forth on Twitter with people.
Yeah.
And it's just like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like, and I'm not coaching, so I know, like, I don't know the ins and outs of like what's making this more, like the most difficult for him, like what's causing him this stress. But I do know, like, you're as a coach, that's not what you're in it for. You're not supposed to be. This should never come to that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And the biggest issue that I have with it is that when you are, it's the dynamic of a coach who made like $50 million, probably more than that, playing in the NBA, right? Like he's generationally wealthy, right? Like his grandkids are never going to have to worry about money. He's making 7 figures as the head coach at Vanderbilt, while these kids are being forced to play because in a situation where like they're horrible, right? Vanderbilt's terrible. They're 0-5. They might not win a game in the SEC. They stink, and these kids are being forced to. Yeah, they're being forced to play because Jerry Stackhouse's salary's got to get paid. We need an NCAA tournament to happen so that the NCAA doesn't go belly up. It's just in a year with all of this stuff going on, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, I can't understand what would drive somebody to do that. Like, and look, I'm not saying that he shouldn't be pissed, And I'm not saying that he shouldn't be frustrated. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't go back into that locker room and motherfuck Miles Stute if Miles Stute would miss a rotation or was not doing what he was told to do or was like not playing hard or was just not into it. Like, you could cuss your guy out in the locker room. I'm sure that you've done stuff in practice or in games that caused Bob Huggins to yell so hard that he literally melted the paint off of the walls in the locker room.
Yeah,
right?
I've done things off the court that caused him to do that. So,
but
let alone on the floor.
But so. you know what Bob Huggins probably would have never done? He probably never would have gone to the media and said, "Hey, Da'Sean Butler fucked this up. Da'Sean Butler messed this up." You just can't do that. And also, if you're talking about a guy that is like the star of your team, like a senior leader that can handle it, where that's like saying that kind of thing is going to light the fire under him. Like, that's a different conversation. There are specific instances where like calling a player out in the press can be useful, right? But like with a freshman in this situation, like I just think it's so wrong.
I can't even see it. I can't see it. I can't see a way around it. Yeah.
And we're being consistent here, man. Like we killed Coach Cal for doing this early in the season when he put out a statement being like, we're kicking Cam Fletcher off the team. And again, like I understood the frustration with Cal, but like you just can't put that stuff out there, man.
He used Cal as a reference too in this thing.
Yeah, that was the funny part. Like
I was like, he was wrong. It's like he was wrong. It's like you used the wrong guy as a reference. Like,
yeah, I mean, look, I kind of understand the point that he was trying to make, but like if you're Jerry Stackhouse in his career is 15-28, and he's 3-20 in the SEC in his career. John Calipari is having a bad season, right? Yeah. Jerry Stackhouse has done nothing to make us think that he's anything other than a bad coach, right? Yeah, so exactly. Like you can't be like invoking John Calipari's name at this point. All right, I just wanted your take on it because I knew how I felt, and I was I didn't play like I didn't live it like you lived it, so. I thought that was interesting. All right, before we get into some of the Monday overreactions, I do have to let you guys know that today's episode is presented by Front Office Sports, the leading publication covering the business of sports. Here on Dauster and Da'Sean, we mostly discuss the action on the court. But if you want to know about the multi-billion-dollar industry driving college basketball and college football, Front Office Sports is your go-to source. FOS College is a free weekly newsletter that cuts through the noise and brings you originally reported stories on the business behind college athletics. With an audience that includes everyone from Division I athletic directors to diehard fans, FOS College has you covered with the stories behind the March Madness bubble, the latest on the name, image, and likeness rules, TV and media rights deals, and much more. So visit frontofficesports.com for the biggest stories on the business of sports and subscribe to the weekly FOS College newsletter or their daily newsletter covering the entire sports industry by navigating to newsletters on the newsletters page on the frontofficesports.com website. We'll also include a link in the show notes, so check that out. It's actually run by a buddy of mine named Edgar Walker, who is really good at developing internet brands, and he helped us figure out how to get a Field of 68 off the ground. So shout out to Edgar Walker for that. All right, Da'Sean, let's get to the Monday overreactions, man. This is the best part of my week. This is my favorite part of doing these podcasts. So the first thing that I kind of want to dive into on this is this season, what we're seeing right now from Kansas. They've lost 3 in a row. On Saturday, they fell at Oklahoma, who's pretty good, but is not great. And Kansas was favored on the road. They were projected to win on KenPom. So I think Kansas, you can say, is a better team. They lost that game. Is this where we really start to see the fall from grace for Kansas for what they have gone through and what they are going to be going through as a result of this investigation into the program and what I'm assuming is going to be a bunch of sanctions coming down from the NCAA whenever that gets figured out?
Fall from grace. As far as like, when you say fall from grace, you're talking about
you're right.
I was going to say, I want to know, like, because
let me define that. This is
their first official slap on the wrist, I would assume, or getting ready to get slapped on the wrist. And basketball wise, this is like a year, but I don't see him like, turning into like going from this great program to
Yeah,
nothing.
because
Like, I don't
I
see
mean
that.
they are Kansas and they do have Bill Self and they're always going to have
Exactly.
money and they're always going to have tradition. But I think that for a while we're going to see them kind of be like the other guy in the Big 12. I don't think that we're going to see them like winning Big 12s. I don't think we're going to see them being the favorite to win the national title like they were last year. I don't think we're going to see them being Final Four caliber teams. I think they're going to be kind of in that like 20 to 25 range for a fairly extended period as they deal with kind of the effects of what has like the way that the looming sanctions have kind of impacted their recruiting already, and what's going to end up coming down the pipeline in terms of maybe potential postseason bans, maybe sanctions for Bill Self, suspensions. I don't know. So I just think that we are looking at what could end up being a sustained period of maybe mediocrity is the wrong word, but at least mediocrity when it comes to the expectations that you find at a program like Kansas.
I mean, when those things fall in general, like those things are damaging to any program. It doesn't matter if it's a small like a small instant, like for example, which almost Oklahoma State is get like in between, almost like they're waiting to figure out what's going on. Maybe not for this postseason, but maybe next, but or whatever their punishment may be. But those things can affect any team. Like I bring up Oklahoma State, they lost the 2 or 3, even 4 guys last year coming into the season. They had an entire new team. They had to bring in a bunch of new players. So it can affect plenty of people. Kansas definitely will be affected. But like you said, I feel that if Bill Self can stick this out, and obviously the fans and the the university and everybody can just hold it together through the tough part. I mean, I don't see Kansas just being a pushover ever. I don't see Kansas being this absolutely terrible team. Like there were teams that didn't go to the tournament and they still found a way to compete and make it worth their those players' time. Like even if they didn't have a postseason.
Yeah, and
it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, you could say I think right now is exactly this season is proof of what you're kind of saying there. Because if you look at like this roster, we talked about it last week, man. Like you ain't scared of anyone on that roster.
Yeah,
and
not.
They don't really have a point guard. They don't have a set. Like we've kind of talked about those issues ad nauseum, and like some of it is not entirely Self's fault. If Quentin Grimes was there, I think that would change a lot of their problems. Quentin Grimes is averaging 18 points and 2.5 assists at Houston as their best player, as a potential All-American for a top 10 team. So if he was still on Kansas, I think that would certainly change things. And also not having Devon Dotson, who went pro and did not get drafted and has played 10 minutes this season for Chicago. And I don't fault him for it. He's getting paid a lot more at Chicago than he was getting paid when he was at Kansas. So
yeah, guaranteed, guaranteed money.
so it like that has certainly impacted them as well. Losing guys that they thought they were going to have, but I think we're really starting to see like Bill Self how to go to JUCO route. Like he got a couple JUCO guys on this roster.
Yeah,
right. Like how often.
And then they're panning out right now, as of right now. But it's tough I always say it's tough for junior college guys to get acclimated sometime. Not all junior college guys, if any one of you guys ever listen to our podcast. But for most, it is very difficult to get acclimated on a team of guys who's already been there. They already have a chemistry. You're the new guy. Not to mention you're going to be the new guy in a new team. You got to understand the coach's temperature. You got to understand the team's temperature, and you got to infuse yourself in that group. It's not easy, especially it's just not an easy job, man. So always,
you're also like you're coming in as a junior too, so you're basically a freshman, but you only have 2 years eligibility.
Exactly.
So there's not as much incentive for people to work on like developing you as a player. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's when you've got a freshman coming in and you're going to have them for 4 years, like you got to get them better because they're going to be there for 4 years. Exactly. Whereas like JUCO players, a lot of times they get brought in to kind of like just plug a gap that you have in your rotation, or it's like, oh man, we really need someone that can guard wings because we don't have that. So let's go find this JUCO kid and hope he can pan out. And if he doesn't, whatever, it's only 2 years worth of scholarships that we're going to lose. Kind of a thing. So a lot of times you kind of run into a situation like that. So I get it, but like, I think that the impact that some of these sanctions, and it's not even just the sanctions, man, because we're seeing it right now. It's like the looming threat of those sanctions is what really impacts the recruiting. Because once you get it, like that's why you see teams like Auburn and you see teams like Arizona implement these self-imposed these postseason bans, because they just want to get that shit over with, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I've talked to a couple of the coaches that are dealing with this situation, and they were like, the reason why you would put this thing into place, why you would self-impose a ban, is because you don't want to have like a 5-year punishment for something that's going to be a 1-year postseason ban. Because as long as this is hanging over your head, and as long as there's always the potential that the next season is going to be the one where there is no postseason,
Exactly.
then that impacts you, because every player that you have, especially if you're someone that can recruit one and dones, if they don't have the chance to the potential that they don't get to play in the NCAA tournament, that can impact who you get. So it's impacted Kansas, and we're really seeing it play out this season. And I expect a lot more seasons like this one moving forward for the Jayhawks than like what we saw last year when they were the clear-cut number 1 team in the country. And at least my pick to win the national title had the NCAA tournament happened.
I mean, they're definitely not the same team, so you can see it. It's just, and then these sanctions, like you say, they may be coming down. It's going to be a nice little body blow to the program, but I feel like they just won't go away. I just don't see them going away. I just can't foresee that happening.
It kind of reminds me of Kentucky, like the late 80s and early 90s. How it was, which I can't, I'm blanking on the coach's name, and I should know who it was. Eddie Sutton was the head coach. I can't remember the name of the assistant, but you remember that whole thing where like some mailman found $1,000 cash in an envelope that was supposed to be sent to a recruit, and Kentucky got in trouble. They ended up getting put on probation, and I think they got the 2-year postseason ban when Eddie Sutton was there, and then that like Pitino was the next guy to come in. And they had the Unforgettables, which was the team that like 92, and they made it to the Final Four with Christian Laettner shot and all that. So I can see Kansas going through something that's a little bit similar. Like maybe Bill Self is the guy to lead them through it. Maybe not. I think it's probably too soon to really speculate too much on what is going to happen with him long term. Although he has told me before that like he's staying at Kansas. He's like he doesn't understand why everyone keeps. It's funny, man. Like I think he was in a groomsman for R.C. Buford, or R.C. Buford was a groomsman for him. So everyone always says Bill Self is going to be the guy to replace Popovich. And Self will always tell you, and he said it to me before, I don't understand why people always make that connection. Well, it's because Pop is old. R.C. Buford is the guy that's going to decide who to hire to replace him. Yeah. And you and R.C. Buford are really good friends, and you might be looking at like a 5-year postseason ban at Kansas. I wonder why people connect those dots, Bill Self. I wonder why it happens.
Hey man, my man says he's gonna stay at Kansas. To believe him.
Yeah, until he's not there anymore.
Until he's not there anymore, exactly.
All right, let's move on. I do want to talk about Iowa because they got run out of the gym in the second half against Indiana. And I went back and I watched it, and I'll have something on my newsletter tomorrow about it. So I got all the takes, man. I got fresh takes on this game. I just watched it. But to me, the issues that Iowa had defensively were glaring and were evident. But the biggest problem facing them from that game is that so Luka Garza didn't get a post touch. Like Indiana went on that 23-3 run. Yeah. Luka Garza didn't get a post touch that during that entire run. There was an 8-minute stretch where he did not get a single touch on the block. And that's because Indiana just started doubling him, and Iowa shot 1 for 10 from 3 in the second half. The only 3 that they made in the second half was when Luka Garza hit one when Iowa was down 13 with 27 seconds left in the game. That was the only thing they made in the second half. And to me, that right there is why Iowa can't win a national title. They might be able to get to a Final Four, but that's why they can't win a national title, because their defense is not good enough to carry them to wins on the nights where teams are able to shut down Luka and Iowa's not making their threes. Right?
Yeah, I wouldn't even argue with you in that scenario, where I still think they have an opportunity. We have the player of the year on your team, like, which he's going to be. He's going to be. Like, I can't. They have a good chance, like a really good chance. Final Four, I can foresee that being the case, especially. But I still think they have a good chance to get into the NCAA championship. even with their defensive issues, the problem with me with their defense is that they just don't stop anything. Like they don't like it's hard to like watch. It's almost like, all right, cool. They don't stop threes from going up, so they don't run people off the line. They kind of play contain, but then they don't contain either. Mm-hmm. Like it's almost like you can get whatever shot you want, kind of, which was kind of happening. Like they beat them off the dribble. They beat them in transition. They got a bunch of baskets in transition early because they weren't even in the end. It wasn't really. I would say they weren't like dominant in the first half, not super dominant, but they got some easy baskets early, and then they got comfortable as the half went on. I mean, their defense, as far as Iowa's, it showed in the second half. Like it was telling.
So I actually thought Iowa. I thought they played pretty well defensively in the first half. But that's because Indiana wasn't really running anything after they switched to a zone. Iowa went to a zone, and Indiana didn't really. Them. Yeah, but like for the last 12 minutes or so of the first half, Indiana didn't really move at all. They were just kind of swinging the ball on the perimeter. They would have one guy like try to attack a gap. He wouldn't get anywhere, and then they'd just go back to swinging the ball around. There was no movement whatsoever. And this matchup zone that Iowa plays, they were able to like match up out of it pretty easily because there wasn't all kinds of movements. Whereas in the second half, what they did to really fuck them up was like the first play of the second half, instead of passing to a wing, what they did was they just had Al Durham dribble over to a wing. And since you're playing that matchup zone, Jordan Bohannon was locked up on the man with the ball. When the guy went baseline, Connor McCaffrey tried to pass him off to the guy on the opposite wing, except the guy that was supposed to be on the opposite wing was guarding Trace Jackson Davis, who was at the rim. So Connor McCaffrey passed him off, but no one told him that was like, you have to guard, like Trace Jackson Davis is right there. That communication was not there. So he was just kind of in no man's land, floating around at the foul line with no one to really guard. The ball got swung back to the top. Joe Wieskamp is pointing, trying to pass him off, trying to give him to someone. And McCaffrey like goes to the guy at the top of the key, which should have been Bohannon's man because they should have switched there and passed him off. And no one was guarding Trey. Like it was literally the most wide open I've ever seen a first team All-American on a college basketball court.
But I mean, no one within
like 10 feet of him.
But that's the issue when they go into these zones because they don't. It doesn't seem like they have any principles with their zone. Like usually, like when we ran zone in college or even in pros, it's the man-to-man principle with the zone a little bit. Like obviously, you're gonna have a man. You're gonna have certain people in that vicinity, in your area. But I mean, that's the problem with zones in general. Like because you can't guard man-to-man, you're gonna give up spots. Now. It's
the communication, right? Like we talked about this with Florida State, where the man-to-man that they play is kind of like a zone because they're passing every exchange, they're just passing people off. And you have to have that. You have to have in a matchup zone, you have to have great communication.
And you have to have great physicality. And that's one of the things that Iowa is missing because I mean, besides Luka Garza, of course, but when you're switching and you're supposed to stop guys like Florida State. They're stopping guys, at least at the foul line. Maybe they get walked in because the guy's stronger than them, or whatever the case may be. But, where Iowa is, like they switch, they don't touch anybody. Everybody's moving around. They don't show any type of resistance at all. And
a lot of straight line drives.
Tons.
Yeah. Tons. And it's like you just like when someone like just kind of squares you up, hits you with a jab one way, and it goes the other way and gets exactly where he wants to go to his spot, like that's when you're not very good defensively. Like
they got beat baseline the entire game.
Yeah, like I one jab and then get where you want to go off of one jab when you're just squaring somebody up like that. That should not happen at that level. So like it's a problem. And I've kind of come around to the idea that in a vacuum, Iowa's defense is not. Like they can win a title with the defense, like the way that they play defense, assuming that they never have an off night offensively. But that's the problem.
That's the problem. Exactly.
Is that when you have that off night and what Indiana did. So in the first half, Indiana just let Luka go one-on-one on the block every time he touched. They played behind him. They let him catch and they just tried to like go one-on-one with Trace Jackson Davis. And like, that was a horrible fucking idea.
Then they switched. Then they got him off him and they put what's his name on him? Thompson. Was it Thompson?
They put Race Thompson on him. And like Race would like he did fine. And then in the first half, like he was like Luka was still killing him. In the second half, I thought it was interesting. What they did was they put Geronimo, they put a 6'6" freshman big, they put Race Thompson, they fronted everything, and they doubled him on a catch. And they just said, we're gonna make you throw that pass over the top. And they got him a couple times.
Was it in a catch? Because it looked like it was in a dribble.
Well, they didn't even let him catch half the time. Like that was the thing. There was such a long stretch where they just did not let him get a catch because they just fronted and they made Ayo throw the ball over the top. And like the 2 or 3 times when they actually completed that pass, like either it like went off of Luka's fingertips or he caught it, but he was too far under the basket, and like he doesn't have that explosion where he can go through and like finish. When he's under the rim and he goes up to try to go through you, like he doesn't have the explosion to keep it from getting pinned against the backboard or a jump ball. So like he kind of has to play a little bit of bully ball, and it didn't work. Like I thought what Archie did in the second half was very smart. He kind of got bailed out by the fact that Iowa missed like 5 wide open threes.
They missed a ton of shots in the second half.
Yeah, they were 5 for 23 from 3, which is not that ain't gonna get it done. So like I just if Iowa's not going to be elite offensively and they're going to do what they did against Indiana, then they're not good enough defensively to do that.
Yeah, but do you notice when Luka doesn't get the ball in the post, he starts stepping out more and more, and then when he starts stepping out and he gets the ball, he starts dribbling and he puts his head. Like I kind of saw, like I would say, like 3 or 4. Excuse me, not 3 or 4, but like maybe 2 or 3 of those turnovers where he wasn't getting the ball in the post. He step out. And then now he's like, well, I'm just going to do it myself. And then those turnovers came. And it's not the first game I've seen where that would happen. Like, he's like, all right, let me step out and go get it. Since you guys can't get me the ball here or there. And I get it, but I kind of feel like that's another thing that can possibly harm them too. Because, I mean, he does a lot for them, but sometimes you can't do everything.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of tunnel vision when he puts the ball on the floor like that. Like
you can see him look down and just –
yeah, the ball goes down. He's like, he's got a one-track mind, man. He's like, I'm getting me get to block, me make layup. It's like a caveman.
Don't kill him with the caveman voice.
He's kind of like a caveman.
Don't kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's where I am on Iowa at this point. I don't think that their defense is quite good enough for them to be able to be what they were on Thursday on the offensive end. And maybe that's just a one-off, but to me, like that's the concern. Like the thing about it with all right, let's take Baylor, for example, right? Like they really struggled offensively against Oklahoma State, but for like probably 32 minutes in that game on Saturday, even without Cade Cunningham, but eventually they put it together. They hit 3 straight threes and they kind of won running away because Oklahoma State was never able to get any separation because they couldn't do anything. Like Baylor's the best defensive team in the country. Same thing with Gonzaga when they were at St. Mary's the other night. Remember? I think that was last Saturday. Where St. Mary's started out hot and Gonzaga just could not get into any kind of rhythm, but they decided like, okay, we're going to have to win this game with our defense. And they just started getting stops. And once they started getting stops, then slowly but surely that transition game started waking up. And then all of a sudden, they're off and running and they win by 15 on the road against their rival. So that to me is the difference between Iowa and everyone else.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to more coaches stuff because I've seen some chatter recently about guys like Mike White and guys like Brad Brunell who set a certain level of expectation with some of the stuff they did early on in the season and have not quite lived up to it for whatever reason. So I don't even know if this is necessarily an overreaction or a hot take or what, but I just want to say for the record, you are out of your mind if you think that someone should get fired for something that happens this season, right? If it's like, take Brad Brunell, for example, been on the hot seat for a while because I think it's been now 8 years since he reached an NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it's a long time.
It's a long time, even at a school like Clemson.
Exactly.
And they looked for a while like they were going to be the best team in the ACC. They had a pause because of a positive test in the program. They were shut down for, I think, like 10 days or something like that, 8 or 10 days. And they come back, and now everybody's beating them by 30. They've lost their last 3 games by a combined 72 points, which, and that's the kind of thing where in a vacuum, you say, well, you know what, that this is probably a sign that we need to change coaches. And it's just like, no, you cannot, not this year. You
Not
cannot do
this
that this
season.
year.
I
Not
can't
this
see. I
season.
can't foresee somebody. I can't say I foresee. I mean, I can't personally see someone being fired because of this season. Mind you, like before the season started, people were talking about not participating in the season. There were players that are in and out because of health issues. There's tons of different types of protocols because of health in general. There's no consistency as a whole from the entire NCAA and all teams. So how could you in turn hold this one? Like, how could you in turn hold the coach responsible? I don't know. I just kind of feel like it's like this, of all years, this year isn't the year to do that. Like, it's just like it doesn't even feel like it's a fair, like it's not a fair opportunity, a fair shot. Granted, he's had 7 prior seasons to impress his counterparts, but even then, I feel like I couldn't possibly see him. Like, I can't possibly see a fair, like, even playing field in this scenario. Like, it's like there's too much that's been happening and going on within basketball and the college basketball to possibly fire somebody because of what's going on this season. Like, I can't foresee that being the case. I hope not.
Yeah, I mean, if you had said coming into the year, if you had told Brad Burnell, listen, if you don't make the NCAA tournament, we're going to have to make a change. That's just what it is. And he doesn't make the NCAA tournament, then I think that is something that's fine. I would probably not do it myself, but I would understand it, right? Like it's been a lot. He's had enough chances to kind of prove himself. It kind of is what it is.
You said 8 years, yeah.
But if you are letting him go and making that move because he started out 9-1 and then the wheels just completely fell off and the bottom fell out of the season, then that to me is like you can't do that. If you were going to keep him, even if he missed the NCAA tournament, then you can't fire him because he went 9-1, had the program shut down for 10 days, and then they just could not get it back going again. Like you can't fire him for that. Same thing with Mike White. I understand the frustration that Florida fans have with him, but this season they had a player collapse at the start of the like people don't talk about that anymore. Like Keontae Johnson collapsed from myocarditis, and it was linked to the fact that he had tested positive for COVID-19 and had dealt with COVID-19. And like you cannot, like I'm chuckling because I don't really know what else. That's not a funny thing. Like you cannot overlook the fact.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you overlook that?
that this program had a player very nearly die. He was critical for like 4 days. He was in a medically induced coma. He almost died. And
their friend, their teammate, their player, like the guy that they went into someone's home to recruit and bring there and promise that they would take care of. And so that's like I wouldn't go as far as to say like, I mean, it's not, I would say traumatic. Is that a push? That's a traumatic thing to have happen to somebody.
It absolutely is traumatic. Like
to the players that are there, him, like the team's culture, like it's a traumatic thing to have happen. And for you to sit there and go, yeah, that sucks that happened this year. But it's just not like, what are we talking about here? Like of all seasons, I understand if this was last year or even when all this stuff is all said and done, and you're like, yeah, you know what, Mike, you're not cutting it for our program. We don't like what's going on, blah, blah. But like, how could you give anyone a fair, like, say you honestly gave somebody a fair shake during a year like this? Like, it's not a fair shake because of what's going on. When you have to stop games and stop practices for 2 weeks to make sure everyone's healthy and then get them back in shape. And like, there's some of these people don't even have kids on their campus. Like at our school, we don't have many kids on our campus. Like our guys had to take a 2-week hiatus as well for COVID protocol. And these guys are just locked in their apartments, can't work out the day before the game and go play. Like who fires people in this climate? I kind of feel like that's you just looked for the smallest thing to get rid of someone for you. That's like an internal problem as opposed to like the actual basketball being the problem.
Yeah. The one thing there's 2 things I want to say. One, you cannot overlook the fact that Keontae Johnson was like also Mike White's best player and like probably the best player in the SEC.
averaging
And so
18.
like it's we would be saying the same thing if like instead of almost dying because of a heart condition, he like tore his ACL, right? I would still be saying you can't. His best player, the SEC player of the year, tore his ACL. Like you can't fairly judge him on that. Like what he built, like this entire team, this entire season around having this dude, and now he doesn't have this dude. You cannot. I just don't think you could fire someone for that when you're just missing your best player. Then throw on top of it the fact that like everything that happened with Keontae, yes, you're right. You can't. I just don't think you can get rid of someone in that situation. But I do think that if you are talking about, say, like let's say this thing with Stack kind of spirals, right? And you know he starts throwing more players under the bus, and he keeps arguing with more people on Twitter, and he like keeps cursing out fans in DMs on Twitter. Like that's the kind of thing where it's like, well, you know what? Maybe that's we need to make a change here because this guy just isn't up for the job. Like what? Like I can see how that decision would get made, and I don't think I would necessarily hate that. But I do think that it's a very different. That's not a performance thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. This is totally like those are different completely. So
yeah, completely different realms. All right, last thing we're gonna do before we get out of here. There's two things that I want you to make a decision on. I want you to tell me who you were most impressed with out of the three biggest games of the weekend. We had Missouri going into Knoxville and knocking off Tennessee in the Conzo Martin Invitational. We had Ohio State going into Wisconsin and knocking off the Badgers, winning by 12, or Creighton beating UConn at home. Marcus Zagorowski had a couple of big shots. UConn was in that game for a while, ended up giving up a 10-0 run at the wrong time. Creighton got hot at the right time. So out of those three games, who were you most impressed with?
Probably more geared to Ohio State. I mean, Creighton going into UConn, which is not an easy thing to do, and winning that game, it's good. At the same time, they're without like one of their best players this year. So like, I mean, I can't hold it to the same weight. Going into Wisconsin and beating them is like I like Wisconsin. I think it's an achievement because they have one of the best guards in the country. They have two of the best big tandems that you can have in the Big Ten. They are physical. They play very well together, and for them to go in there and beat a team that like that is impressive. I can't weigh the other teams to that.
I think I would probably go with Missouri, mostly because of like, look, they kicked Tennessee's ass. There's something going on in Tennessee. Like I got to try to figure out what it is. Like there's just something is not clicking there, and it's more than just Jaden Springer being out. Like John Fulkerson has been horrible for a while. That toughness that we saw from them before just is not there. So there's something going on with Tennessee, and we'll get to the bottom of it. We'll figure it out, and I think they're going to eventually turn it around. There's too much talent there not to, but they have definitely come crashing back to earth. I think that's the easiest thing to say. Go ahead.
That's happening to a lot of teams, though, man.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of people are taking their dips where they take their dips right now, whether it be through a 2-week protocol, whether it be through in-house stuff, or just not playing well, man. It's just, like I was happy to see Rutgers get a win. It's been what 5 games? 4? What is it?
They had lost 5 in a row, 6 out of 7. They needed that. We'll get to Rutgers in a second. But the other thing about Missouri and Conzo winning that game is like when Conzo left Tennessee, it was not on the best of terms. There were some issues involved from stories that have been reported at the time with having a black head coach at that university, and I think that there was that probably felt very good for Conzo to go into that arena and whip Tennessee's ass when Tennessee was a top 10 team. So I don't know if he'd ever say it publicly, but I got to think that Konzo was very, very pleased by getting that win. So
Hey man,
good
take
for him.
your victories how you get them. Take your victories how you get
So
them.
I've always liked Konzo. He's always been good to me. I do think, and tell me if I'm wrong here, I do think that he is probably like top 3 on the most intimidating coaches list. Have you ever talked to him?
No, never actually.
Man, he's like 6'6". He's got the bald head, and he's got the deepest voice I think of any coach I've ever met in my life. And he's just like, you know how there's those guys that just kind of have that presence, that
Big
larger than
John.
life presence. Who's got Big John had one of those.
Big John,
Bob Huggins has one of those. Frank Martin has one of, like, there's guys that it's just like when you're around them, you're like, oh shit, like this dude's kind of scary. So Konzo's absolutely one of those guys, very intimidating. So I'm glad he got that one. Good for him. All right. The most important win of the weekend. I think there are 5 teams that kind of fall into that conversation. Rutgers went into Indiana and got a win. Stanford, without Zaire Williams, without Dejon Davis, and without Bryce Wills, knocked off UCLA, who was undefeated in the Pac-12 at home, despite the fact, how about this? Stanford has been living in a hotel, playing off campus because their school is basically like in that county. You're not allowed to have any groups. Like you can't. They're not allowed to practice with the number of players that they have in a practice gym in the county where Palo Alto is. So they're playing at like the Santa Cruz Warriors building and living in a hotel, which is part of the reason why I think Zaire Williams made the decision to attend a funeral, and why I don't know if we're going to be seeing him back at Stanford at any point in time very soon. So, so Stanford's win against UCLA, shorthanded. Louisville knocking off Duke. Maryland going into Minnesota and just kicking Minnesota's ass, or Kentucky putting up 82. Did you know Kentucky could score 82 points? I thought they would need 3 halves. I thought they would need 3 halves to score 82 points. And they beat up on LSU, man. So it's those 5 teams. Was it Rutgers? Was it Stanford? Was it Louisville? Was it Kentucky? Or was it Maryland that had the most important win of the weekend?
Stanford and Rutgers had the most important ones because their team needed those. Cal needed that win. I feel like Cal probably needed that win more than what their team would. I mean, their team definitely needs the win, but I feel like we've seen Kentucky win and then fall back into like their stuff. So it's not like I don't foresee Kentucky like winning and then turning over a new leaf. Like that's not the vibes I'm getting from the team as of right now. So I feel like that win is more like the coach needed that win, whereas opposed to Rutgers, who was like lost 5 straight games. Like that team, who's a good team, as a very well coached team and a good team who's just hasn't looked good, hasn't been in it. They needed that win so they can like build off of that win, regardless if it's Indiana, who's not the best team. But then this is the same Indiana that just knocked off the number 4 team in the country a couple of days prior. So, like, they're not like a bum team at the moment. They probably felt good that day too, and they lost to who I still think is a decent Rutgers team. They just have fallen on hard times. So I feel like Rutgers really needed that.
Yeah, Rutgers has had the worst of the Big Ten as a gauntlet life.
Yeah,
it's been really rough for them. So yeah, they absolutely needed that. I think honestly, look, I think the Maryland storyline is awesome. Like they're 0-6 in the Big Ten, unless they are like they haven't won a Big Ten game except for when they are on the road against teams ranked in the top 17 of the AP poll. It's hilarious.
They're fucking killing, and they're killing. Yeah. That's the best.
They won at Illinois, they won at Wisconsin, and they won at Minnesota, and they've lost every other game they played in the Big Ten, which is just so funny to me, man. Like how does that happen? How does that happen?
Some people just get on the road against big teams and just do.
Hey man, like that might be enough to get them into the NCAA tournament too. How many teams have 3 wins as good as
how crazy is that?
3 best wins. That's crazy when you think
how
about
crazy.
it. So,
how crazy is that? Exactly.
Yeah. And yes, you're right about Kentucky. Although I will say this, like this has been the most interesting Kentucky team to me. Like it's probably since the undefeated team. Like I cannot get enough of these guys. I cannot get enough of this storyline. I cannot get enough of like Coach Cal trying to figure it out. Like it's like the puzzle that you just can't get done. Like, how there's like if you do a crossword puzzle and you'll just sit there and you'll stare at it and you're like, I don't want to Google these answers. I'm going to try to figure this out myself, but you can't quite get there. And there's always like a couple of letters just aren't you can't figure out. There's a couple clues you just can't figure out that you're like almost right there. And I feel like that's what Kentucky has been for a while now. Like it's starting to come together. BJ Boston is starting to make some shots. Keon Brooks is starting to play bigger minutes. We're starting to see Devin Askew and Davion Mitz figure it out. Like Dante Allen is starting to make some shots and learn what his role is. Isaiah Jackson is not making as many horrible decisions on the defensive end.
It reminds me of like a little soap opera, bro.
Yeah, and like this is the moment it finally came together. And here's the thing: I want Kentucky to like get hot and win like 9 of their last 11 games. I want to see them in a position where like you have a 12 or 13 loss Kentucky team that is on the bubble but finished like second in the SEC. I want that so bad because
that can happen.
Yeah, I do. Like, so if they play 27 games this year, right, and they lose 10 of them, they'd be 17-10, right? Let's say they lose one more game in SEC play. There's not a lot of great wins available to them, right? Because there's not a lot of great teams in that league. So let's say that they end up going 17-10. They're probably still on the bubble. They might end up being on the wrong side of the bubble. I cannot. I want that to happen. Like everything about this is just fascinating to me. So
they still have like 4 ranked teams to play.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Maybe they will have a chance. Maybe
Alabama, Texas, Mizzou, and then Tennessee twice. Yeah, they got a chance.
Oh, I forgot about the Texas game.
Yeah, it's right here. It's coming up
this weekend, right?
Yeah, after Alabama, they got Alabama again.
Man.
On the 18th.
Right, so
what is that? No, that's 18 Alabama. I'm tripping. They got it. Not tomorrow. The day after tomorrow.
All right. I just pulled up their schedule. Here are the next 5 games.
I'm looking. Alabama,
Alabama, Texas at home, at Missouri, Tennessee at home.
Woo!
Then they get Arkansas. Then they get Auburn. Oh man!
If they win these next 3, if they can even win 2 out of these 3 games, I feel like I'll just retract everything I said about them.
I love them. I'm always so fascinated about them, and I want them to figure it out. There's times when I kind of feel like a Kentucky fan, right? Like I feel like I'm like, come on, guys!
I'm telling you,
hit
bro,
that fucking shot.
Think about what you just said earlier, man. Like they got the stuff going on with Cal talking about the guys on the team. Then you got the guys. One of the guys on the team has a seat. He can't play. He's not doing well. There's a guy on the team that just never plays. All of a sudden he gets in the game. They just like it almost creates this narrative for each player and each player on his team. Like it's literally like a storyline thing Cal does. Like it's insane, bro. Like it makes it's very entertaining. I hope they do well. I'm excited to see them play against Texas. I want to see how Olivier Sarr does against Jericho Sims and the gang. That'll be fun.
Not well. Here's to hoping that we see Keon Brooks at the 5 in that game. All right. Da'Sean, I think we've been here for long enough, man. We kept you guys here for about an hour. Hey man, we got a good week of basketball coming up. Texas Tech and your boys are playing tomorrow night. We have Kentucky, Alabama on Tuesday night. So we got some good hoops coming here soon. One night this week where me and you are going to go with the live stream, the Beers and Ball live stream again. And until then, we will see you guys and we will catch up soon.